Hi everybody. Yesterday, the video talked about a lot of vocabulary involving genetics, and usually I didn't have you memorize, vocab words, but for this chapter, you're going to need to know what all these different words mean because there's so much vocabulary and it's very important. So make sure that you take a look at that vocabulary page, and that's why I'm giving you some practice. To practice identifying the different vocabulary words will truly help you with this chapter. So for the homework, for number 1, you're identifying heterozygous and homozygous. So what's going to help you remember the difference between these two is the prefixes. Hetero means different, and homo means same. Heterozygous genotype is going to be a capital and a lowercase letter. Okay, but for homozygous, you can have homozygous dominant and homozygous recessive. Homozygous dominant would be 2 capital letters. Homozygous recessive would be 2 lowercase letters. Okay, so identifying these examples, AA, that's going to be homozygous because 2 capital A's, they're the same. Heterozygous, 1 capital, 1 lowercase, 1 capital, 1 lowercase, 2 capital homozygous, 1 capital, 1 lowercase hetero, capital lowercase hetero, capital homozygous, capital lowercase hetero, capital lowercase hetero, capital lowercase hetero, 2 lowercase homozygous, capital and a lowercase heterozygous. Okay, now we're looking at the words genotype and phenotype. So in this example, it's giving you the genotype and you have to determine the phenotype. So genotype, right? We're thinking genes. So here we're looking at the genes, right? The letters, the combinations of alleles. That's the genotype. The phenotype is what's determined by the genotype. So depending on what those alleles are, that's going to identify what phenotype it has. Phenotype, you can think of physical, that's going to be the physical trait. So that would be your eye color, whatever the genotype, the genes are determining. So here it's giving you the genotype. It's giving you the letters for the alleles, and it's telling you pink is dominant to green skin. So pink is the dominant trait, which is going to be represented by a capital letter. Green skin would be recessive. That's always represented by the lowercase letter. So capital P. We have 2 dominant alleles, which means that it's going to be a dominant. The phenotype is going to be the dominant trait, which is pink skin. Okay, we have 1 dominant, 1 recessive, still going to be pink skin. Here we have 2 recessive, 2 lowercase letters, that's going to be green skin. Okay, next, headset eyes are dominant to stalks. So headset eyes are dominant, stalks are recessive. So here we have 2 dominant. The genotype has 2 dominant alleles, so that's going to mean that the phenotype is headset eyes. Okay, same thing over here. We have 1 dominant allele, 1 recessive. Dominant's going to dominate. It's going to be headset eyes again. Here we have 2 recessive, so that's going to be stalks for the phenotype. This one, no horns are dominant to horns. So having horns is recessive. Okay, 2 capital, it's going to be dominant, so it's going to have no horns. Here, 1 dominant, 1 recessive, no horns. 2 recessive, this one's going to have horns. Okay, so in this example, it was giving you the genotype, it was giving you the genes, the alleles, and you had to determine the phenotype. Okay, now this one, it's telling you that tails are recessive. So what's going to be dominant? Well, no tails, right? Not having a tail. So here, 2 dominant. So the phenotype is going to be no tail, 2 recessive, this one will have a tail. Okay, now for the last one, it's the opposite. It's giving you the phenotype. It's giving you the physical trait. You have to determine the possible genotype. Okay, and remember to use the letter of the dominant trait. You always use the letter for the dominant trait. So antennas are dominant to no antennas, which means that I'm using the letter A, okay, because antennas are dominant. So a capital A is going to be dominant. A lowercase a is going to be recessive. If they have an antenna, antennas are dominant. So you can have 2 dominant traits that would lead to this phenotype, or you could have 1 dominant and 1 recessive that would also result in an antenna. No antenna would be 2 recessive, 2 lowercase a's. Next one, blue skin is dominant to orange skin. I'm not going to use the letter O because orange is recessive. I'm using the letter B. Capital B, dominant. Lowercase b, recessive. So blue skin, that could be represented by a genotype of capital B. It could also be represented by a capital B, lowercase b. Orange recessive would be represented by 2 lowercase b's.